Welcome to Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen, a bi-monthly podcast designed to teach the searchers, seekers, and spiritually curious the basics of metaphysics and new thought. They are all about the basics, but they are not basic bitches. Now, here are your hosts, April Darley and Jen Merkel.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen. My name is Jen Merkel. I am a transformational life coach and a certified hypnosis practitioner, and you can learn more about what I do and sign up for my wellness newsletter at jenmerkelhypnosis.com.
And I'm April Darley. I'm an emotional strength and confidence coach, and you can find out all about the work I do at aprildarley.com.
So be sure to give us a like, subscribe, or follow, however you might be listening to us. Tell your friends. Please share. If you enjoy our podcast, please do let people know. We are non-monetized, and any support you can give us is truly appreciated.
So I was wondering how you're doing as an Aquarius, because we're in the age of Aquarius and we have 5, almost 6 planets in Aquarius.
There will be 7 as of next week. There'll be 7 planets in Aquarius. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing okay. There's a lot of really amazing things going on in the stars. It was, the moon was in Libra a couple days ago, and that's my moon.
Okay.
Cool. Right. But the new moon coming up, or the dark moon coming up, February 11th, which actually is going to be in the past by the time this airs. But anyway, that is in Aquarius. So that's when I think that's when we'll have 7 planets in Aquarius. And it's definitely a highly spiritual time for me. And recently I did a little ritual for, I'd say Imbolc. That's what a lot of people would say, but I feel like I'm not really celebrating Imbolc so much as I'm celebrating from my Norse heritage and that which they call Spring Mother, or they call it Disting. And the book that Wendy Griffin had recommended on our podcasts way back when we did the pagan episode, that I think was episode 19, I believe. So I picked that up and I've been looking at it, and I was like, wow, so the stuff in there is really, really good. So I decided to do the ceremony for that. And so I'm going through it all and I'm like, this seems really witchy, really witchy. I know you talked about the high witch and everything. I'm like, I need a robe for this stuff because I didn't have a robe on, but I might get one. But anyway, it's a lot. I did end up getting some candles and some other minor things, but most of the stuff I already had. I did a little altar, and then I did the whole thing. I cast a circle. Okay. Following the instructions in the book. Yeah. And I said the chants in them, which I really liked because they weren't, I know some of the things out there, like some of the witchy stuff is like a little poem. It sounds a little cutesy, and they don't sound like old world English or anything, but they just sound a little bit more matter of fact. They're a little bit more me than that cutesy poemy kind of thing, which I don't mind. It's just not me. So it was pretty cool. And I did that. And basically it was about protection and manifesting. Well, actually, casting the circle was the protection, but then the Spring Mother part was about manifesting, because it's the beginning of, the end of winter, the beginning of spring, things are coming to bloom. I have some fresh flowers on my altar that I put there, and a picture of Freya that I printed out from the internet, which I love, is so pretty. And so I did this little thing. And I also, I burnt the holly that I had left over from Yule. And once again, the smoke detectors went off, just like the last time we burned things together, which we already talked about. It's like, when am I going to learn my lesson? Yeah. And then the dog freaked out. I'm like, oh, okay. So I just I'll remember next time. But it was just a little tiny bit. It wasn't much, but it was enough. So
yeah, I also had a burn incident in my Imbolc ritual.
Oh my goodness.
Right? So I went out on the balcony to do mine. And so I had a yellow candle for Bridget, and I do the low magic, practical magic. So for me, there's no casting the circle. There's no set invocation or anything like that. So I'm burning this yellow candle. I'm calling Bridget in. I left a gift of honey in an acorn cap for my fairy friends. And I'm burning some bay leaves with intentions on there for Bridget and asking for things like creativity and enhanced clarity and help and things like this. And I'm also burning my holly from Yule. So I did a little thing, burnt my bay leaves, talked to Bridget, put the holly, lit that on fire, put it in the bowl with the others. And that one's like, whoosh.
Yep. That's what happened to me.
And then the holly kind of fell onto the candle. It's just a chime candle, but then it started like thinning it and burning it from the middle. And then it's like, oh dear, I have a lot of fire now. It's like, oh dear. I let that burn for a bit and I finally had to put water over it. The fire was just like going crazy and I didn't want to crack and break my bowl, like my ceremonial bowl that I had. So I'm like, oh dear, that's like a fire hazard there.
So speaking of water, I actually had made some moon water from our last full moon, and I used that on my altar. And also, Karma has an issue with her eye. I don't know if we've talked about it on the show before, but the vet thinks that she might not be producing tears in her left eye. And it's always been a problem. And you've seen it before too. And if you look at some pictures, like on my blog and stuff like that, on my Facebook, and Instagram, you can see that she doesn't always open it all the way. But I got her some eye wash from the pet store. And it was the last bottle they had because of COVID, everything's out. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to put a little moon water in there. And I've used other eye washes on her before, and they haven't really done much. But this one, I started doing it morning and night with the moon water in there. You would never know, looking at her right now, you'd never know she had an eye issue.
Wow.
I've been only doing it for about a week now, and it's been fantastic. So I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
For at least, even if I have to do it for the rest of her life, it's okay. I don't want her to have surgery if she doesn't need to, or who knows if that would even be an option. But yeah, she's doing great. So that moon water, I'm telling you, it's like magic.
It is magical. All right. Speaking of magic, we've got a great show.
We do. I'm excited about the show. I always love talking about tarot anyway, and this is really cool. We're calling the show all about scary tarot cards because these are the cards that have the shocking imagery. At least they may come as a shock for someone unfamiliar with tarot cards, or if they've seen them like in the movies when the death card comes up or something like that. And, but everything is symbolic. And so we're going to go through them and explain the symbolic meanings and the messages the cards may show. We're mostly using the Rider-Waite imagery since it's pretty much the standard.
I just want to say that you may see this as Rider-Waite Smith. So this imagery was done by Pamela Coleman Smith. And I even recently learned that she was a woman of color who did all of this imagery, and she was a spiritualist who happened to be friends with Arthur Waite, and that's how they got connected. So she is the illustrator for this most famous tarot deck.
That's amazing. I never knew that. That's fantastic. Well, different decks often have slightly different images, but they usually hold the same meaning. And actually, I have a deck. I have a standard Rider-Waite, but I have what's called the Radiant Rider-Waite, and it's a little bit more zhuzhed up, I guess. It's not, it doesn't look as primitive, but it's the same images. But then there are also other ones like, there's Angel Tarot. There's like one of my favorites, Santa Muerte or Bianco Nero. Those are my two favorite tarot decks. And I even just recently got a new deck that's a Norse deck.
Oh,
I'm, all into the Nordic stuff now, I guess. So yeah, and I know, April, what's the deck that you like to work with? It's tarot, but what is the?
So I work a lot. I also have a Rider-Waite, but I have the borderless Rider-Waite, and that looks a little more patinaed and antique. But I also have the Joie de Vivre tarot.
That's the one. Yeah. So cute. Really cute little like impish looking images.
Yes.
Great.
I do.
Great imagery in that one.
And then I use the the Everyday Witch tarot quite a bit. So those are my top three.
Cool. So tell me, April, have you ever had a client panic or freak out about a tarot card during your reading?
A little bit. Yeah, for sure. And I blame Hollywood, right? Just like you said, I blame Hollywood.
for a lot of the things that we do. But it makes for a good story. So, you know, whatever.
And that's one of the reasons I think I will use whimsical decks, because they're less scary. If I'm reading in a fair or for a group of people, they just look sweeter. And so there's a tendency not to have that visceral reaction like there is to the Rider-Waite-Smith, where you see this this imagery that's heavy on a lot of times religious connotations or things like that just is kind of scary to people.
I've had times before when I've been at a show where I'm doing readings and I'll have multiple decks out and I'll let the person, you know, pick the deck. I'll ask them if there's one in particular they're drawn to, and I'll show some of the images so that some people, they are drawn to the dark decks. Like my Santa Muerte is very dark. I mean, it's skeletons and, you know, all kinds of stuff. So it's arguably scarier than the Rider-Waite. And some people just, I mean, I love it. And so, you know, some people are really drawn to it, but I did have a client once freak out when she got the death card. And I was like, it's okay. It doesn't mean someone's dying. She's like, really? Because I had a reading with that last year, and the lady said that my dad was going to die. And I was like, wow, I would never do that. First of all, I don't bring that kind of energy in. I've had things before where something will come in, but it won't say your dad's going to die. It'll be like, you know, tell her to tell her dad to watch out when he's crossing the street or whatever. Right. So, you know, I'd spin it like that, but, yeah. And so I explained to her, you know, we'll go into what it means in a minute, but for that reason, when I do shows, I'll always ask the person if they've had a reading before, just so I kind of know if I need to do more explanation. And if they haven't, then a lot of times I'll tell them, okay, just so you know, I know you've seen movies, but these cards might look scary, but they really don't have scary meanings. And really, that's the whole reason we're doing this show today.
Absolutely. So speaking of death, we're just going to roll on with that topic.
Why not? We'll start out at the end, right?
Let's do that. So the Rider-Waite-Smith, that is pretty much, it is your gold standard. So if you are a student learning tarot, your instructor's probably going to say, get this deck or a deck that uses this kind of symbolism so that it makes it just easier for you to use. So the imagery of the death card it's a skeleton in armor atop a white horse. And that skeleton represents that piece of us that remains after death. And the armor is about the invincibility of that part of us that remains and how death will come to all of us eventually. Now, the white horse, and if you think biblically even, you know, there's a pale rider, you know, on a pale horse was death. It's one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. So you do have that imagery here. But the white horse represents purity, even among death. And death is carrying a black flag that symbolizes sadness or mourning. And this flag has a white 5-petaled flower. So the number 5, if you are aware about numerology or angel numbers, if you've listened to that episode that we did, the number 5 symbolizes change. And that flower represents beauty, purification, immortality. Now, if you look around the pale horse, you'll see that a king is already lying dead under the horse. And that's really meaning that death comes for all of us equally. So there's no one above death. There's a pope or a religious figure standing in the way of the horse, and that figure is pleading for death not to take him. So this is in reference to some people are really afraid of death, but you can't stop the inevitable. There's a woman off to the side who's looking away from death, and for some people, they will try to avoid thinking about or dealing with death at all. And the last figure is a child who's looking at death without fear, because that's the ultimate state of freedom and acceptance. Now, I know there's a lot going on in this card, but if you look past the death and the horse, you're going to see in the background there's a boat sailing down the river. If you're familiar with Greek mythology or other different cultures, souls are transported to the afterlife often on boats. An example of that is Charon the ferryman in Greek mythology. And you'll also see 2 towers in the background, and you'll see that same 2-tower configuration in the high priestess, and you'll also some of it is in the moon as well. And it refers to that duality of death and rebirth. So like you, Jen, 99.99% of the time, you know, death, the death card does not mean death. So don't let the Hollywood scare you, because death generally refers to a transformation, a change, letting go of the old, rebirth, and the beginning of something new. So it does signify the end of one situation or phase in your life, but it's also telling you that there's the possibility of something new that's coming up for you that's often a better fit for you. So when death shows up in your reading, it's giving you a heads up that some changes need to be made.
We had mentioned some of the other decks have different imagery. In the Santa Muerte deck that I referenced earlier, the depiction of death shows actually a woman, the angel of death, who is pregnant, very visually pregnant, looks like her baby is going to pop any minute, and she's looking down into a crib. So that really is the sign of something new is just about to be born.
Absolutely. So any changes that death is signifying, these changes may be sudden or unexpected. And it can also signify that there's some unhealthy attachments that would be for your greatest and best and highest good if you just let go of that stuff. So what you resist persists. So death is really letting you know, try not to hold on to these fading situations and just go ahead, even though it's painful, let go of what's not working for you so that you can move forward.
So similarly, speaking of unhealthy attachments, the next card we're going to talk about is the devil. And the imagery for the devil card, the devil himself is on the card depicted as half man and half goat. He's got bat wings. He's perched on a pedestal, holding his right hand up, and his left hand is downturned with a lit torch. And also on his forehead is a downturned pentagram. And we're going to be talking about pentagrams in a little bit, but below him are a naked man and woman, and they're chained from their necks to the devil's pedestal, indicating that he is holding power over them. The man and woman have horns and tails, so it's almost as though they're morphing into the devil. The man's tail is on fire, signifying his need for power, and the woman's tail has grapes at the end, symbolizing her need for luxuries. And it's not a male female kind of thing, although I guess it could be, because, it could easily be the other way around. Mm-hmm. Basically, the meaning of this card is about greed and materialism being bound to lust. And lust can be the need for things, or it can be actual sexual lust. The man and women, if you look at the card, they're chained, but they're chained around their necks. They could escape if they wanted to, because the chains around their necks are loose. They could really just pull them over their heads. So it's kind of saying that it's a self-imposed prison of vices. So when you get this card, it may be a sign that you're living beyond your means or trying too hard to keep up with the Joneses. You might be living in excess or letting your vanity get the best of you. It's kind of like those, deadly sins. You might recognize that this is the case, but have a great deal of difficulty overcoming it, which can be like addictions, for example, drugs, alcohol, sex, food, shopping, any type of indulgence that when used in excess has a detrimental effect while having a power over you. Also, it can mean a lack of fulfillment. So no matter what or how much you have, it just never seems to be enough for you. So in summary, this card just means it's time to pull back and recognize what's really important and to be grateful for what you have and do your best to break that bondage that you're creating for yourself.
Okay, next card up is Judgment. A couple of, maybe a month or two ago, I felt like the Judgment card was stalking me. It was straight up like stalking me. Every reading I did for myself, Judgment, Judgment, Judgment. And if you look at this card, it can be scary. So the imagery on this card, Judgment shows naked men, women, and children rising up from their graves with their arms outspread, and they're looking up into the sky. And in the sky is Archangel Gabriel, the messenger of God. He's blowing his trumpet, and these people are ready to be judged to find out if they'll be accepted into the heavens or not. And in the background, there's a mountain range signifying the insurmountable obstacles and the impossibility of avoiding judgment. Now, for someone who does, for you and I who does emotional release work, the concept of judgment is super scary. And that keeps a lot of people from becoming what they really desire because they're afraid of judgment in their earthly life. But some people are afraid of judgment in their afterlife. So I wanted to include judgment because just the topic is a heavy, heavy topic. Now, when you get into the meaning of judgment, though, this card is asking you to rise up and step into your power and your destiny. Even if you don't feel ready, it's saying, go for it. All right, just you are more ready than you think you are. And it often appears in your life when you're on the cusp of a major change or you need to make a major decision. So it could feel like you're at a crossroads and you're not sure what your next step should be. But the decisions you are going to make, they require a blend of intellect and intuition. And it's going to require you to be honest with yourself to really figure out the answers and the new path that you need to go. So judgment asks you to do somewhat of a life review. Now, Radley Valentine, who does a lot of the Angel Tarot and Archangel Tarot, things like that, he's renamed this card Renewal or Life Review. So if you look at it that way, it's like there's some review, there's some things you need to figure out in your life so that you can change patterns, learn your lessons, and you can make the choice that's best for you. So judgment can also signify a deep healing and that you're ready to put the past behind you. You're ready to leave behind these deep emotional wounds. So if you're unsure what to do next, you can reach out to others for comfort and you don't have to go it alone.
I was going to say also, it can mean discernment. So using your own judgment in a situation. So if you're having a reading, let's say a financial reading, and judgment comes up, it might mean that, you need to really think about decisions that you have to make and use your judgment. How, you know better, and kind of trust your intuition kind of thing. Next on the list, we have the Tower. This is like I hate this card.
Dun, dun, dun.
I'd rather have any other card. And I actually recently did a blog post that was 2020 is the Tower, because it was. Mm-hmm. So it shows a tower located on top of a cliff, and it's been struck by lightning and it's on fire. And you've got two people jumping out of the windows to escape the flames in desperation. So this also might be related to the Devil card, the two people. There's a crown, which symbolizes achievement, victory, and immortality. That's presumably was on the top of the tower and is now popping off because, everything is exploding pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
So the meaning here is that chaos is happening, lightning striking, and your world might be turned upside down very suddenly. And this card usually means that you've been reluctant to make some much needed changes in your life. So the universe is going to force you to do it. It's kind of like the universe is saying, hey, you're going to be stubborn and not change. Well, here you go. Here's something that'll force you to change. So that's why I don't like it. I'm an Aquarius. I don't mind change. I just don't like to be forced to change because I don't like to be forced to do anything again. Mm-hmm. Aquarius here. So anyway, when this card comes up, it's time to clear out the old to allow the building of something new. And I wanted to kind of sidebar here. As I had mentioned, there are other decks that have different depictions. There's an Oracle deck I have. It's called the Energy Deck by Sandra Ann Taylor. And the card in that deck is called Storm Warning. And it's basically the tower. It shows a tornado going over the sea. Everything's really rough. And when I get this card in a reading, I tell clients, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Something's going to happen or something's going on right now that's kind of tearing up your world. But what's going to happen when that's all gone is it leaves space for building something new. Everything's clear. Everything's fresh. There might be a little bit of a mess to clean up, but it's always good because it leaves growth. So it's kind of like a twofold thing. I don't like the Tower, but it does mean that there are good things to come. It doesn't always mean something disastrous is going to happen either, but it will definitely be a foundational change. You'll have to depart from the thoughts and ideals that you've had previously because your old ways aren't no longer going to be useful to you.
So this next card is one of the most famous images in the tarot. And I'm like, why make this particular image famous? But it's the Three of Swords. And it's a heart pierced by three swords, representing the pain inflicted by words, actions, and intent on the emotional and physical self. There are dark clouds that gather in the background of this card, and that's referring to, yes, there's pain, but just like storm clouds will disappear, there's also hope. So the pain and the hurt you experience, will dissipate just like those dark clouds. So the meaning behind the Three of Swords, it indicates that yes, you're feeling some grief, heartbreak, emotional pain, sadness, and you've been deeply hurt or disappointed by the actions of others. So even though you suffered a major heartbreak or setback or loss, the pain is temporary and it will pass. So when you get this card, it really is a signal to take the time you need to grieve and heal, and don't try to rush that process, but just know that you're a very strong person. You're going to have the ability to bounce back stronger than before. And to completely heal, you want to make sure that you are expressing those emotions and that you don't shove those back down. Because when the pain passes, you're going to have a better perspective on the person or situation that caused you the pain in the first place. And the Three of Swords can show up when you're also being affected by the words or deeds of other people, especially if they're jealous, spiteful, or bullying you. So although you're being affected by their behavior, you may want to take a little minute to look inside and figure out why are they triggering you? Why are those words triggering you? And it's an opportunity to look on that situation with compassion, because hurt people will hurt other people. But it's also an opportunity for you to heal old emotional hurts, but just offer some compassion and forgiveness to people who maybe are having challenges of their own.
And our next card on the list is the Nine of Swords. This is showing a person sitting up in bed, face in hands, appearing to be very distraught and anxious. Looks like they might have just had a very bad nightmare. On the wall behind them, there are 9 swords hanging horizontally. And on top of this, on this person's lap, there is a patchwork quilt of roses and constellations in the design. And also the bed frame has a scene of one person defeating another. So the swords are about mind, logic, intelligence, ideas, and communication. This card could be a carryover from the Eight of Swords, which shows a woman who's blindfolded, surrounded by swords. So it could be, since this is the next progression, it could mean that the person is still suffering after the hidden truth and emotions have been revealed. It's basically about worry and anxiety and what keeps you up at night. It's about fear of the future and things that you can't control. It can also be things from the past coming back to haunt you and giving you nightmares. So it's about lack of trust, suspicions, regret, can be work stress, and, just overall being consumed by worry. What it means is that it's a time to stop worrying about what you can't control. Stop making up scenarios about what might happen and instead concentrate on the present. Just let things play out, as they're really never as bad as you can imagine they're going to be. Now, the roses on the quilt indicate that spirit is there to protect and comfort you. You must only recognize that spirit is there to help you. The constellations on the quilt symbolize that the future is written in the stars. Again, no need to worry about the future because you have no control over it. So there's a lot of law of attraction here. What your mindset is on is what you're going to bring about. So you have to put those doom and gloom thoughts out of your mind, because you're just going to be attracting more of that if you don't do that. So just kind of see if you can flip your mind around to the positive, or at least be mindful about what you've got at the present.
So the next card is also from the sword suit. And if you're seeing a pattern here that there's of several swords in here, the swords is that mental anguish suit. It is that mental anguish, these challenges that we all face mentally. So that's why there's so many swords on this list. The next card we have coming up is the 10 of Swords. And buddy, if you see this card, there is no happy, happy, joy, joy in this card. It is, the imagery on this is a man is lying face down and 10 swords have stabbed him in the back. This man is dead, lying bleeding on the ground. There is a red cape that's draped over the man's lower half, and that's a signifier of, yes, he still has dignity even as he leaves this world. But depending on which deck you use, there's a puddle of blood in this, and some people still show the guy alive but crawling, right? So he's not completely dead. So challenging card. In the background, there's a dark, ominous sky, but the sun is rising on the horizon. So there is a silver lining to this card. So it's bringing you a renewed sense of hope and opportunity. There's a calm sea in the background, which brings solace, suggesting that even in times of darkness, there's a peace and calm to be found.
And we didn't really mention this, I don't think, earlier, but water signifies emotion. So the fact that the sea is calm shows that, sometime in the future, your emotions will be a lot calmer than they might be, at the present moment.
Absolutely. So this card has the nickname of being the rock bottom card. But as you know about rock bottom, the only way left is to go up. So the Ten of Swords represents a painful and often sudden or abrupt ending of a relationship, job, or situation. So this is an abrupt ending, much like the Tower, that's going to rock your world. And it can be really painful to go through. This card can mean betrayal, like someone stabbed you in the back, quite literally, from like a cheating ex or lies, gossip. And no matter what, the relationship won't be quite the same as it was before. So even though you've been hurt, the Ten of Swords cautions you not to take on the role of a victim or expect others to save you or bail you out. This is a card that's really asking you need to rely on your own inner strength to pick yourself up and move forward. And you are strong enough to do that and move forward on your own. And once you begin to pick yourself up and move on, you're eventually going to heal and have this great understanding about why things happen the way they did and how you can avoid them in the future. So you do have this amazing power to learn from your pain and come out stronger in the end when the Ten of Swords shows up.
Great. And now our next card we're going to talk about is the Five of Pentacles. So before we talk about this card, I wanted to talk a little bit about pentagrams, because in the Rider-Waite deck and a lot of other decks, the pentacles, which are coins, look like pentagrams. So that's like a star with a circle around them. And there is, again, thanks to Hollywood, there is a certain something about pentagrams that mean devil worshiping, satanic symbol, but that's only from recent history. Even for me, when I was all those years ago, when I was in high school, that's when like the hair bands were really popular, and you had like Judas Priest and Ozzy Osbourne and a whole bunch of other even more crazy, I don't want to say crazy, but more seemingly satanic bands, and they would use pentagrams everywhere. So there was just this dark idea about them, but they are actually an ancient symbol that have been used by many religions, and that includes Christianity, in which case they represent the 5 wounds of Christ. And then somewhere along the line, like many things, they were demonized by Christians somewhere along the line, and they're not, I don't believe they're used anywhere anymore, at least not from my own experience growing up as a Catholic.
I think if you go to some really old churches, you can see some in the artwork of stained glass or on the building itself, but really old.
Yeah, exactly. So when the star is pointing up, it's thought of as spiritual energy elevating. And then when it's pointing down, it's thought of as the spiritual energy coming down from above. Though there is some history where it does represent upsetting the proper order of things, like the triumph of matter over spirit. And that's in reference to what we talked about earlier with the devil card, the devil having the upside down pentagram on his head. And even now, they're still widely used in Wicca and paganism. Even I mentioned about the disting ritual that I did a little while ago, that I had a pentagram that I used because of the symbolism and what it means. In this case, they are, especially with Wicca and paganism, they symbolize the 5 elements. When you combine all those elements and symbols, you get a pentagram. The 5 elements being spirit, which is at the top. Then you've got earth, water, air, and fire. And connecting all those, makes a star. But when you combine the actual images that represent those elements, it also is a pentacle. So it's kind of cool. Pentacles in the Rider-Waite Tarot represent earthly desires like money and possessions. So in other decks, they might be depicted as coins or discs. I've seen that happen before as well. So, but it's all pentacles. It's the same thing. So getting back to the card, the Five of Pentacles, the imagery here, it shows two impoverished people walking in the snow, bare feet, freezing, hungry, tired. One of the people is injured with crutches. They're just destitute. You can see next to them, there is a stained glass window that has 5 pentacles in the decoration. And it looks like a church. So it looks kind of like, stained glass window of a church. So this card represents despair, desperation, hardship, but insecurity, loneliness, poverty, some kind of loss. It could be emotional, monetary, or material loss. And the person with crutches seems to be feeling sorry for themselves. He's down on his luck. This might signify some longstanding debts and loans or excessive credit card balances, mistakes from the past might be haunting you now. This is a reminder that things might look bleak, but there's always help if you look for it. If you see, again, that the church they're passing, this symbolizes hope and spiritual support. They don't seem to be even noticing that it's there next to them. It's kind of a reminder that, spirit is there for you. You have a spirit team to help you. It might be a tough road and a long journey, but you can overcome these difficulties, even those from far in the past that are still plaguing you.
One interpretation that comes up many times for the clients that I'm reading for, it tends to relate to a spiritual poverty rather than a physical poverty. So for some people that don't have a spiritual practice or religious practice, maybe they don't even meditate or take time out of their busy lives to reconnect with what's important to them, I will have seen this card pop up, and it's that person is suffering spiritually in some way due to a lack of connection. All right. So we hope you have enjoyed the bad boys of tarot, how we are demystifying the scary cards to make it all better.
There are really no bad cards in tarot, and we hope that we've done a good job explaining to you what they all mean.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed the demystification of the tarot.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
This has been Spiritual Basics Podcast with April and Jen. Find full episodes on your favorite listening platform or visit spiritualbasicspodcast.com.